You and your girlfriend, Fran, had been together for about 2.5 years, and for the most part, things had been going well. You had grown comfortable with each other, sharing countless memories, and even considering the possibility of taking the next step by moving in together. The thought of building a future with her excited you. However, in recent weeks, you began to sense a change. Fran had become distant, less engaged in conversations, and her usual warmth seemed to be fading. Instead of immediately confronting her, you decided to give her space, hoping that she would eventually open up about whatever was weighing on her mind. Last Friday, she finally sat down with you and, after a deep breath, made a significant request. She wanted to open up your relationship. Her words struck you like a cold wind. She carefully explained her reasons, emphasizing that she believed it could be beneficial for both of you. While she attempted to sound rational and reassuring, you couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than she was letting on. So, you asked her directly, did she already have someone in mind? The hesitation before her answer was all the confirmation you needed. When she finally admitted it, your worst fears came true. It wasn't just an abstract idea to her. There was someone else she had been thinking about. A whirlwind of emotions surged through you. Was she already cheating? Or was she laying the groundwork to do so with a clear conscience? Your chest tightened and your mind raced. You found yourself pacing across the room while Fran tried to explain her reasoning further. But no matter how she framed it, all you could hear was betrayal. The trust you had built over the years felt like it had crumbled in an instant. Eventually, you made your decision. You calmly grabbed a sports bag, stuffed it with her belongings, and handed it to her. With a firm voice, you told her that the relationship was over. There was no room for negotiation. You asked her to leave her spare key on the table as you turned on the TV, signaling the finality of your decision. Fran stood there, initially speechless, her eyes welling up as if she might cry. She tried to reach out to you again, but you cut her off. You made it clear that you didn't want to discuss it any further. You needed her to leave. After she walked out, an overwhelming sense of emptiness washed over you. You sat in silence, staring at the screen, but not absorbing anything. Then, without warning, tears came. You hadn't expected to react this way. Had you overreacted? Had you let your emotions dictate too much? Your phone buzzed repeatedly. Calls and texts from mutual friends who had already heard about the breakup. Some were concerned about how you handled it, while others were supportive. You felt torn. Despite the pain and betrayal, a part of you still cared about her. But you also knew that trust, once broken, was nearly impossible to restore. A week later, you agreed to meet Fran at your usual coffee spot. When she arrived, she looked beautiful as always, but her eyes betrayed her sadness. You could tell she had been crying. Before she could say anything, you asked her to tell you everything. No more half-truths. You needed complete honesty. She took a deep breath and confessed. About 2 months ago, while out with her friends, she had met a charming and attractive guy. He flirted with her, and they spent the night dancing. That detail alone was a red flag. You both had previously agreed that if she ever found herself in such a situation, she would distance herself. But she hadn't. Instead, she had continued thinking about him, and her friends had encouraged her interest, subtly nudging her toward the idea of opening the relationship. Eventually, the thought consumed her enough that she decided to bring it up to you. Hearing this, you couldn't help but recall the past. In the early days of your relationship, the two of you had explored swinging and three-way intimacy, but those experiences had been mutual, shared out of excitement and trust. That was years ago. This was different. This wasn't about shared exploration. It was about Fran wanting someone else, separately from you. That distinction made all the difference. You could tell she hadn't expected your reaction. She assumed you would either get angry or simply refuse, not that you would end things altogether. That assumption infuriated you. You had always been honest about your stance on these matters. You even recalled a conversation from a year ago when you had discussed another couple facing a similar dilemma. Back then, You had stated plainly that if one partner wanted to see other people, the right course of action was to break up. Fran had known this, and yet she had still gone through with her request, either believing she could convince you or that you would begrudgingly accept it. As your conversation continued, you pressed further. Had she already been intimate with this man? Had she developed feelings for him? Had she met him again? She reassured you that nothing had happened beyond that one night of dancing, which gave you some small relief, but not enough to change your decision. The trust was already fractured. By the end of the conversation, you both understood that this was the end. Fran admitted her regret, saying that if she could, she would undo everything. You could see her pain, but it didn't change what had happened. You paid for your coffee and walked her to her car. When you opened the door for her, she broke down in tears. Unable to resist, you hugged her tightly. The two of you stood there in silence for almost 10 minutes, embracing for the last time before she finally drove away. The aftermath hit hard. Seeking clarity, you decided to escape to the mountains for a weekend of solitude. Camping gave you space to reflect, free from the noise of the city. But upon your return, you found your phone flooded with messages from concerned friends and family. You reassured them you were okay, explaining that you just needed time. Then, a message from Fran appeared. She told you she still believed the relationship wasn't over, that she was willing to wait for you to process everything. The words sent a jolt through you. Did you want to reconsider? A part of you did. But deep down, you knew that going back would only lead to more pain. Experience had taught you to be cautious about making rash decisions. So instead of responding, you resolved to take your time. Over the next month and a half, you wrestled with your emotions. Seeking advice, you turned to your best friends, Sel and her husband, Pete. They gave you a blunt but necessary truth. Your hesitation was more about the fear of being alone than about genuine love for Fran. That truth hit hard but made perfect sense. It forced you to confront what you had been avoiding. This relationship was no longer right for you. In the end, you met with Fran once more. This time, there was no uncertainty. You told her that while you still cared for her, your paths were now different. There was no resentment, no anger, just the understanding that it was time to move on. She was heartbroken, but she accepted it. The weeks that followed were tough. You went through an emotional low, but chose to channel your energy into work and personal growth. Instead of rushing into a new relationship, you embraced single life, rediscovering hobbies like video games and camping. For the first time in a long while, you felt free. Free from expectations, from betrayal, from heartbreak. You welcomed this new chapter with open arms, knowing that the best way forward was to focus on yourself and embrace the simplicity of life as it came.